Hello, my name is Patricia Shih. My interest is immigration in the United States. Because immigration is such a vast subject, and because I am writing the story of my own family's immigrant experience in the context of the history of Chinese in America, I will focus solely on the history of Chinese immigration today. Let's get started. Today's discrimination, racism, and hate and violence against Asians is not surprising considering that almost since the moment Asians stepped foot in America, they've been targeted. Perhaps it's because we are so visibly different from whites. Today, I want to present a short history of Chinese to America immigration and the obstacles, laws, and hate they endured. This is by no means a comprehensive history, but we will see that immigration of the Chinese rose and fell based on America's view of them, the relationship between America and China, and economic situations. The history. Not too long after the American Revolution, the first discriminatory piece of immigration legislation was passed, the 1790 Naturalization Act, which reserved naturalized citizenship only to free white persons. In 1850 came the start of the first of the three great waves of Chinese immigration. In 1849 was the Great Gold Rush, when many Chinese left their native lands to try their luck in the mines in the West. This marked the start of the second wave. 1863 to 69, many Chinese men worked on the first Transcontinental Railroad, working for 1/3 of the wages of whites. Many of these workers were hired from the gold mines, and some were actually imported from China. 1868, the Burlingame-Seward Treaty lifted any former restrictions with regards to emigration, establishing the right for Chinese for free immigration and travel in the U.S., and granting China most favored nation status. This was made to ensure low-cost immigrant labor for U.S. businesses. Only merchants were allowed to bring their wives and children from China. If a Chinese immigrant had American-born offspring, the children automatically acquired American citizenship, but not the parents, unlike what was granted to European immigrants. Over the next decades, laws and new taxes were passed that discriminated against the Chinese. Among these were the prohibition of non-whites testifying against a white person, giving them no legal recourse to crimes inflicted on them, including murder. The 1875 Page Act, which effectively barred almost all Chinese women from immigrating, resulting in separation of families. This, coupled with miscegenation laws passed in 1889, meant no marriages or children for Chinese males living here. 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed due to years of bad economic times starting in the 1870s. This was the first piece of legislation in U.S. history to target a group for exclusion by race, nationality, and class. This act outlawed almost all Chinese immigration to the U.S. and denied citizenship to those already here. Many more new acts were passed over the decades. 1888, the Scott Act, federal law stating that Chinese migrants, even those entering and living in the U.S. legally, could not re-enter after leaving temporarily. 4 years later, the Gary Act extended the Chinese Exclusion Act for 10 more years. It required the Chinese to register and get a certificate as proof of entry at the risk of deportation or hard labor. Now, skipping down to 1917, immigration acts banned all immigrants from many parts of Asia, including large parts of Western China, making them ineligible for citizenship and land ownership. Finally, in 1943, the Magnuson Act repealed the Exclusion Act because China was our heroic ally in World War II. However, it allowed only 105 Chinese, selected by the government, to enter per year. but it offered Chinese nationals already in the country naturalization. 1952 to 67, Immigration and Nationality Acts furthermore lifted national origin quotas. This was the start of the third wave. 1960s to the present, many immigrants, both documented and undocumented, came. Most Chinese immigrants during this time were from the People's Republic of China, whereas previously they came from Taiwan and Hong Kong. And finally, this is the timeline of the rise of the Chinese population in the US from 1840 to 2010. I want to thank the Asian American Advisory Board for this AAPI Heritage Month celebration, and Weiwei Zhang for inviting me to speak to you today. It's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you.